Shalom, I am Rabbi Shaul Praver. You're watching Rabbi Rock. Those who do not remember the past are condemned to repeat it, said a very wise statement by George Santayana. As Jews, we have a lot of history to know, to learn, which we do learn of. For example, through our holidays on Pesach, we speak of the ancient Egyptians. In Purim, we speak of the Persians, Babylonians. And in Hanukkah, we speak of the Assyrian Greeks. And we get different layers of history. And of course, we all know about the first century, the life of Jesus, and the events with the Romans. But I'd say, starting around the 3rd century, there's a lot of very fascinating history that gets a little fuzzy in the mind of most people. And therefore, we like to act on George Santayana's words. Those who do not remember the past are condemned to repeat it. We want to remember the past, so we shouldn't repeat the same mistakes of the past. And today we are really blessed by having a really fine and creative historian, Dr. Herbert Ausubel. And he tells the story of his own family, his Jewish family, and through the story of his family, we learn the story of the Jewish people. What an exciting way to learn history. And with no further ado, I welcome Dr. Herbert Ausubel. So great to have you here today.
It's a pleasure being here.
So you are a medical doctor, but you have a hobby in history that has really sprouted and blossomed beautifully.
It is a hobby in history in a sense. Of course, I was destined to do it because history was my area of interest long before I entered medical school.
Now, you were a student in Harvard University in the days where there was strict quotas of Jews entering the university?
In the days of when I entered Harvard Medical School, there had been up until that time a quota which limited the number of Jews, but even though I pointed out carefully that I was a Jew, I was nevertheless accepted.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, what inspired you to tell the story of your family going back not only hundreds of years, but really thousands of years?
In a sense, I was destined to do it from a long time ago, but the specific project itself began when my son, Ian, who is now one of my associates in practice, was to become a bar mitzvah. And it was customary in our congregation for the child to do something of religious significance before the time of his bar mitzvah.
Yes.
And at my recommendation, he wrote a history of his family, which was compiling material from various ancestors as well as from friends of the family. And he wrote it up in about 50 or so pages and presented it to the synagogue, and copies were distributed among those who came to the synagogue that day.
Did that spark your interest? Is that where it began?
Yes, I felt the project should go on. And so then I became the individual who took over, although my children were greatly involved and my wife was most assuredly involved. And we eventually selected 6 ancestral families, 3 on my side and 3 on my wife's side, and the sum of their experiences over 3 millennia served as a microcosm of the history of the Jewish people.
Fabulous. Let's begin. Let's begin with your life, and we'll go backwards until we get to thousands of years ago.
Well, my life began, as I described to you, as the son of an individual, my father, rest his soul, who had come to the United States from Vienna in 1921.
Yes.
After the first post-World War I anti-Semitic riots.
Mm-hmm.
he recognized that the handwriting was on the wall. And so he came to the United States and worked and saved and brought over his father and mother and all his siblings.
Yes.
His first work, he was a poet, among other things. His first work in the United States was called A Dark Cloud Has Descended, in which he fearfully envisioned the potential disaster to the Jewish population in Europe. And his reasoning was that when enlightened countries, such as Germany and Austria, turned in such virulence against a Jewish minority who had pictured themselves as Germans, who had entered the mainstream of German activity, then a dark cloud had descended, warning of the storm to come.
Now, what year is this?
1923. And he urged the Jews of Europe to leave, for those who are strong in body and in heart to go to Israel to reestablish the ancient homeland, for the rest to come to the United States.
How did he urge them?
Well, it was a tome poem, which was his first column in Der Tag, a Yiddish newspaper.
Yes.
And he published that, he wrote that column for a period of 30 years.
I see.
And the United States, he felt, while it had not achieved all its goals, had as the basic premise for its founding liberty for all, including freedom of religion, and that this was the golden Medina, the golden land, not because the streets were paved with gold, because you had the golden opportunity to practice your faith, to work and to achieve to the limits of your ability, coupled with your willingness to work hard. Mm-hmm. When Adolf Hitler came to power, it was the discussion around the kitchen table. I might have been very young, but already I was made well aware of what was going on in the world, and I became extremely cognizant of it.
This is Austria or Germany where you...
No, I was born in the United States. I was born in Brooklyn.
Okay.
And I was attentive to every bit of news taking place in the world. It didn't matter the fact that I won many current events competitions against children 10 and 12 years older than I. The important point was that I was realizing what was going on, realizing the disaster that it held for the Jewish people, and then realizing what had to be done to achieve the goal in terms of the survival of our people.
Fabulous. Please give us a scope, overview of your book, or actually several books at this point.
It's a 6-book series. Will be a 6-book series. I've actually finished virtually the entire 6 books. As I said, what we did is we selected 6 ancestral families.
Yes.
3 on my side and 3 on my wife's, which took different trails through the world. And in the course of time, over the past several thousand years, they have been in each of the 6 continents of the world. I describe places that I had to have visited before I would write the chronicle.
Yes.
The chapters I refer to as chronicles. And so through these people, I tell the story of the Jewish people. I tell the story of their happy events and their tragedies.
How did you get these stories? Where were these recorded?
Well, for example, one of the best recordings was on my wife's side. My wife is a direct descendant of King David. The material on that is now in the Annenberg Institute for Jewish Genealogy. And she is descended via Hillel, via Rashi, and via the Heilprin family of rabbis.
We're Landsmen. We're related.
Well,
because we're related to Rashi and King David too.
Now, what had happened was that her great-grandfather was the Grand Rabbi of St. Petersburg.
Yes.
And when he came to the United States at the beginning of the Great Pogrom, I love the term great. What was great about it? The slaughter of more people. In any case, he came to the United States, and what he brought with him was a trunk full of documents, which are now in the Annenberg Institute for Jewish Genealogy.
What's his name?
His name was Levi Yitzchak Yechilzon. Was the
Levi
rabbi's
Yitzchak
name.
Yechilzon. Yes.
And he brought the trunk. Actually, my wife is descended from the oldest child, but the youngest child, being an attorney, they're usually cleverer than the rest of us. And so he kept the trunk.
I got you.
He gave her grandparent the samovar.
Okay.